Welcome to my podcast, Shaping Your Journey. My guest in this episode is Todd Sucherman, drummer for the great rock band Styx. Todd speaks to us about his journey from growing up in Chicago to becoming the drummer for Styx, and of course, working with many, many other artists along the way. Brian Wilson, Peter Cetera, Lawrence Gowan, and many others. He's a well-known studio drummer, an in-demand clinician, and a generally very creative musician. Here is Todd Sucherman. Hello, Todd. Thanks so much for being and taking the time being on my show. It's been a while. We've been like bouncing back and forth, and finally we were able to do that. So thank you so much.
Aldo, thank you for having me. And it's great to see you, man. It's been a little while, but it's great to be here, and it's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks. Before we get on to the discussion or the conversation about shaping your journey, and the decisions we make and those things that come at us, and where it takes us, which is always interesting. Start from the beginning. Just tell us where it started for you. Where was that first spark, and then you can talk about it from there. That inspiration.
Okay. Well, one of the greatest cards, one of the greatest hands I've been dealt in life was being the youngest in a musical family. So it started with my father, who was a drummer and a doctor. He was 50 when I was born. My mother was 30, so I was the youngest. And my father put himself through med school playing drums in the late 30s, early 40s. So he was a big band drummer. And he led a dual life. He was a doctor by day and a gigger at night.
Nice.
And he took some road dates, but he couldn't go for very long because he had to practice. But he was Lena Horne's drummer for a bit in the 40s, and he was one of the house drummers at the Chez Paree for close to 20 years, which is like the Cotton Club of Chicago in those days. So my love of the drums, clearly started with him. He married my mother, who is an actress who could also dance and sing and play the piano, and my two older brothers, Paul and Joel, 5 and 7 years older, played piano and bass. So I filled out the rhythm section, and I was immediately in love with the drums, and I was immediately in love with music from the time that I was an infant. It's when I look back on my childhood, it's all I ever wanted to do. I never wanted to be an astronaut or a fireman or, it was always music. And it was such a great way to grow up because there was always something to talk about at the dinner table. It was music, sports, and comedy. Nice. It was great. It was never a dry, dull dinner. So son, how was your day at school? Good. There was always something to talk about.
Nice.
We'd go for a swim or throw a ball around, and then we'd go in and play music. So it was just a wonderful way to grow up. And I often say this, but it's true. I'd go to, as a kid, I'd go to friends' homes, I'd go to their houses, and I'd look around and I'd think, where are your instruments? How can you live like this? Not even a decent stereo. What's the matter with you people?
Nice.
So the journey started there, and it feels like a highway that I've been on, my entire life, and it never stops, which is great.
Yeah, and also in Chicago, Chicago was always like a music town. Yeah, looking at your setup in the back, it reminds me when I first went to Chicago. I went to drum camp, and then I went to Chicago because I met Maury Leishon. I'm sure you know who that is, right? And he was the great icon in Chicago. So we got Frank's Drum Shop, right? And when I met Maury and his wife, Jan, I was like a kid walking in a store that looks like your studio, but of course, 4 floors, I don't remember. But it was just massive, and all these great drummers coming through. And I said, oh, man, this is incredible. And that's Chicago, right?
Well, it's funny that you bring that up, Aldo, because my father's office was right around the corner from Wabash Avenue.
Right, at South Wabash.
Frank's Drum Shop was, and 2 or 3 doors down was Bill Crowden's Drums Limited.
Right.
So they were the Coke and the Pepsi of the 2 drum shops, whichever you thought was the Coke of the 2.
Right.
But my father would work half days on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and as a kid, I'd sometimes go down there and spend the morning and the early afternoon in his office, and then we'd go to Frank's and Drums Limited. And I think if I were to psychoanalyze myself as to why I have this setup in my studio like this, is because of that unbelievable, magical feeling of going with your dad, going with my dad, and having the elevator doors open, and you look in and you saw floor-to-ceiling drums and gongs and chimes that way, and cymbals this way, and percussion and all sorts of African-looking things, and it just drum sets. That's like the Willy Wonka reveal, where they see the gumdrop forest and the chocolate river, and it just takes your breath away.
Yes.
So I think that I wanted to create that same feeling every time that I come into this sacred place to get some work done. Whether I'm recording or I'm practicing, just trying to improve. I want to walk in here and be inspired and have that magical childhood feeling every time I come out here. So yeah, it's really funny that you bring that up, because those were absolutely magical places that once existed on this planet.
Yes, and I mean, I remember well, and I mean the dynamics between, because his Maury's wife Jan was a dancer, and so you had this combination of people who totally got it, and when you walked in, you felt like home. You're no matter how big the place was, how busy it was, everybody was like your family.
I got to tell you this one thing. I'm not sure that a camera will be able to see it. You could see it in the corner, it's right over there, the brown, the mahogany Slingerlands.
Yes. I
right
see
there.
it. Yeah.
There's the rack tom and there's the floor tom.
Yeah.
So that kit, oh boy, I don't want to mess the camera angle by showing it to you, but it's a rare 12, 14, 18-inch bass drum Slingerland kit. They didn't make a lot of those. And in 1969, the year that I was born, my dad went to Drums Limited. He walked in there and he was going to check out, about getting a new drum set. And at the time, the Slingerland drum rep was in there talking to Bill with that very drum set. And Bill introduced my dad to the rep and said, this is it's Doc Sucherman. He does a lot of work in town. And the guy said, hey, well, do you want this kit? You can have this kit if you promise to keep the front bass drum logo head on. And my dad said,
Yeah.
sure. So if you could only see that we kept our promise for 56 years. The front logo head is on that kit, and that's the kit that I learned how to play on, and I did my first gigs, professional paying gigs as a kid on those drums, and they were acquired right there on Wabash Avenue in those grand old days.
Yeah, it's so inspiring. I mean, when you have those kinds of experiences, people who influence you so positively, and it was magic. I mean, you grew up there, but I used to go all the time. They became like second parents to me. And I remember it was funny because I walked in, and when I told the story, everybody says, "Well, yeah, that's what he does." So I was after the drum camp that I was at. I stayed a few days in Chicago. Was in the shop, a few days because you're seeing all of this massive. I had never seen so many instruments, and I had been to a literary percussion camp right in Madison, Wisconsin, and there I had met Gary Burton, who showed me how to hold four mallets, and all those guys, Joe Morello. I mean, everybody was there, and I'm twisting around, and Maury says, "Although you look like you're thinking seriously. What's on your mind?" And I said, "Maury, I really want to buy an M55. That was the vibe that would the professional model, but I don't have the money. What should I do?" So he said, "Take the vibes. Send me the money when you have it." I said, "You're serious?" And a lot of people, Mike Balter, I mean, all these people, everybody has that story who had this kind of relationship with him.
Of course, that's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Imagine that now.
I'm not so sure, Todd. But that was amazing. You know, imagine like you grow up in this and these people running around and just giving all the time. So I come from this camp and my mind is like gone already. And here's this man who I barely knew. I only knew him for a couple of weeks. Gives me a set of vibes and trusts me with it. My mind was like, you know, for lack of a better word, it was blown to smithereens. So then, of course, I said, I have to make a good with what I said. He trusted me with it. I was driving home. I felt like I flew home, set it all up, and then of course, you know, worked on different ways. How am I going to get him the money? So I sold my shoes. I worked hard. I did everything I had to do just to keep my promise, because I said I can't let him down because that's incredible, doing something like that. Anyway, but I'm sure. You know,
That's
today
amazing.
It's a lot harder for everybody, I guess. But that was nice having that experience, and you were right there in the center of that hurricane.
It was such a it was such a great place to grow up, and you know I'm kind of moving ahead in the timeline a little bit, but you know even a place like the Jazz Showcase, which still exists, it's in a different location, but when I was growing up, it was in the lobby of the Blackstone Hotel on Michigan Avenue, which was a Art Deco, old, beautiful hotel. And Joe Siegel, I think he died a few years ago. I mean, it seemed like he was about 85 years old all through my the childhood. But he allowed underage humans in his establishment because he wanted to share the music with the younger generation. I mean, you couldn't go to the bar and order a drink as a 15-year-old, but he'd allow you in there.
Nice.
Which was amazing. So, I mean, I got to see Tony Williams 27 times there, Elvin Jones, Jack DeJohnette, you know, Max, you know, on and on. It was amazing.
Wow.
To have that experience. And, you know, and if you grow up in Possum Ridge, Arkansas, you know, that wasn't afforded to you. That wasn't part of your upbringing. You know, back then you just had to go buy records, which is fine. But it was really wonderful to be able to go down as an underage patron and be able to see and hear these musicians play. You know, many of whom are long gone, not with us anymore.
Now. Yes. And you played. I mean, you were also playing at an early age too in some of those places. So that was, and a lot of great musicians coming through, right?
Yes, I mean, you know, when you talk about the journey, one of the biggest and most important stops in my progression as a musician was playing with my older brothers. Them being older, they met other musicians who are older. So I was often pulled into situations with musicians who were, you know, very much older than I was, whether they were college age or they were already starting to get gray hair and be veterans, you know. But through a long series of events, my two older brothers started working at a resort hotel in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, which is about 2.5 hours north of Chicago and an hour north of Milwaukee. And in 1983, when I was, let's say, I just turned 13, I got the gig. The band leader wasn't the band leader anymore. My brother Paul became the band leader, and so I was hired. And I spent 6 summers from the time I was 13 to 19 or whatever it was, playing 6 nights a week from Memorial Day weekend to Labor Day weekend, and playing with older musicians. And sometimes it'd be a full big band. And just about every night there'd be some different, you know, comedian. And these guys were, you know, 60, 70 years old, and they had books with, you know, the Frank Sinatra impersonation medley, the Tony Bennett, you know, and you had to read these yellowing charts that looked like, you know, ancient documents. And, you know, if you're blowing kicks back there, you're going to have, you know, guys in their 40s and 50s with their saxophones and trumpets turn around and looking at you. So it was, you know, not only trial by fire, there's no experience like experience. Yeah. And then doing that 6 nights a week for,
wow,
you know, all the summers of my teen years, basically. That was gold. that was, maybe my greatest education on the bandstand and off the bandstand, because though my parents should have probably been thrown in jail for negligence, thinking that their older brothers were going to be good chaperones for me, it was the best. It was the best of times on all fronts, I can tell you. So, but from a musical standpoint, my heart aches for a lot of the younger musicians who don't have that type of experience, because where can you get a gig six nights a week in a big giant show lounge with a PA and lights and people up there running spotlights? I mean, it was like the last bastion of those nightclub good old days, and I got to taste that. But boy, the experience of doing that and having to be consistent and regular, no matter if you got a cold, no matter if you got food poisoning, no matter you're on. The show must go on. Yeah. So that was very much a boot camp in a way, but also it was I was definitely thrown into adulthood quicker than I should have been, but I have no regrets with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think those of us who went through that kind of thing, I had a variation of that. When I first moved to Montreal, because I grew up in Ottawa, when I first moved to Montreal and studied at McGill, my roommate was already becoming a top drummer in town. So he was getting super busy. So I was subbing for him all the time. And at one point, it was one of those kinds of gigs where it was 3 nights a week, different artists each week. They come in with their charts, one rehearsal, and you played 4 shows, two on Sunday. And it was like all sight reading, and there was no forgiveness. He said, you arrived, it took me an hour to get there. And it was amazing experience. You don't know if you had a comedian, a big band, something, or some artist. I mean, these are not top level people, but like there was a circuit, and one of those circuits that every week they just in and out, and it was amazing experience. And you had to read it. Let me look at that.
The funny thing is, it may not have felt like an amazing experience at the time, because you had to do a job and you had to nail it and you couldn't screw up. So it was sort of, mentally and physically all hands on deck to get the job done. There's no, gee, isn't this great? Oh, this is like, there's none of that. Yeah. That only happens, in hindsight, looking back from oftentimes a pretty great distance. But those are the type of experience that made us who we are, because you take that with you, you gather and you grow. And when you're able to have worked in such fertile soil with, you meet so many musicians. Some are wonderful, some are horrible. Like you have to deal with all the experience of dealing with a guy who's a jerk, or the club owner that stiffs you, or the thing you got shorted on the check from a guy, and the guy's now not calling you back, and he's not, you know what I mean? Like you have to go through all those things to garner your life experiences. And it's all wonderful, really.
And, again, I mean, always saying yes and then doing it right. And I remember you made me think of when you're playing for some artists who are in those circuits. The band, we were so tight because we played so much. Now I had this gig full time, right? And someone would come in and the band leader wouldn't say anything. It would just to see how we'd react. Because some singers would always skip beats, right? You know that one. And you're playing along, and I mean, their musical level may not have been what it could have been. So they're skipping beats all over the place. So you have to follow them. And the band just moves along with them. Nobody notices anything. And it's always, and you say, wow, did I dream that up? Or was that those 3 or 4 bars, or 3.5? But everybody's landing.
Exactly, because if you're doing you're playing a gig like that, and there's a singer, and let's say it's a female singer, and she comes in, 6 beats early. My brother was awesome because he would, the rule is you never let the singer hang out to dry. You always got to follow them and make them look good. So he'd be right on it, and then I'd have to not only get the cue from the singer, but I hear Paul do it, and he's also looking at me like we're here now. And so you just all of a sudden you just melt into, okay, we're here now. It doesn't matter that it was a bar of 3/4 or 6/4 or 7/16. You have to follow the singer and always make them look good. And that's especially for a piano player, because if you dig in your heels and you go, nope, it's here.
No.
Not only are you a jerk, but you're hanging someone out to dry, and then you got a train wreck on your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's incredible training, because then you'll learn how to listen really well. And then not just to the person who's leading, and as you say, you have to make them look good. I mean, it's their gig. I mean, you're just accompanying. It's not your gig. And you have to make them feel good, and they'll remember that. And then it makes their day, and it makes everybody happy. There's no point saying, no, I was right. No. And just the training of being able to fall in on one, and like in your case, here's and we all went through that. You say, okay, where is it now? It's right there. Okay, and you follow, and everybody follows there. Beautiful trip. I mean, it's funny at the time, maybe not so much, but you say we did it.
It can be scary at times.
Nah, nice. And then you went on to study at Berklee, or did you stay in Chicago for a long time?
Well, I before I got to Berklee, I through my older brothers, I got pulled into the junior high jazz band and symphonic band from the time I was in first grade. So I spent 8 years in the school band.
Wow.
And then went to high school and did everything: symphonic band, jazz band, marching, pit band, show band. I was involved in all that stuff. And in my mind, through my first 2 years in high school, I thought that, I'm just going to load my car up and drive out to California, and the rest will be history. And then by the time I got my junior year, I thought, maybe life isn't like that. Maybe I need a little bit more experience before I do that. And so I started thinking about going to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I also wanted to study privately with Gary Chafee while I was there, who was no longer at Berklee. So I started to take my studies more seriously, because I wanted to be able to, my high school studies more seriously, because I wanted to be accepted. So I brought my grades up, because I really did sort of just do the bare minimum just to get by, because all my focus and attention was here. So yeah, I went to Berklee for 1 year. My parents had split at that point, and there's some financial hardships and whatnot, and I ended up paying for a good chunk of my year there from the money that I'd made, that I saved up from playing. So I went for 1 year. Skip Hayden and Ian Froman were two teachers that were really important to me while I was there, and I did, by the stroke of luck, got a slot with Gary Chafee. When I got to Boston, it was other drummers let me know, like, dude, you messed up. You should have called him a year ago. There's like an 8-month waiting list to study with Gary. And I thought, I totally screwed up. But I just happened to call him before Christmas break when someone had canceled their spot, and I convinced him to give it to me. I'm only going to be there for one more semester. Please. It's really important. And he took pity on me, and he said, can you be here Wednesdays at 3? I said, absolutely. I said, all right, see you next Wednesday at 3. Click. And I had a class Wednesdays at 3 that I just never went to again.
Right.
It was that simple. I'm going to go see Gary every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. So that was a really great time, an important time for me, although I did have a couple issues with Berklee's ensemble program, if I were to be truthful. But the friends I made there, the experiences I had there, it was a whirlwind 9 months.
Sure.
And then I went back to Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin for my last summer there. And this is sort of a critical part. That was the summer that I barely went out to the bars, and I didn't chase girls. I woke up. Part of my deal the last year was the nightclub is mine in the day. It's mine. So I would go and I would practice every day, and I'd record my practice sessions. I'd go back to my room. The other part of the deal is I don't live in staff housing. I have my own hotel room. So I had my own hotel room. I'd listen to what I did that day. I'd get ready for dinner, go to dinner, come back, listen some more, get ready for the show, go play the show, record the show, go back to my room, listen to the show. And I know that sounds really boring, but after 5 years of kind of having a phenomenal social life there, it was now time to buckle down because I wasn't going back to Berklee. I had 3 months to take all this information that was swirling in my head and all the paperwork that I had. And now I have time to sit and methodically get this into my playing and into my vocabulary and into my second nature. So that's how I spent that whole summer, every day, six days a week, being very methodical with working on the materials that I had learned, playing along to records like we all do when we learn, and just really trying to grow. And I think that was one of the more hyper speed growth periods I had because I was doing that 6 nights a week for 3 months.
Yeah.
And so I felt when I was done, by the time it was September of 1988, I had grown by leaps and bounds, and I was ready to be a man in this world and take on
Right.
the Chicago music scene full throttle.
Yeah, and it shows the importance of a great teacher. I mean, Gary. I mean, I knew him. I actually had one lesson with Gary, and I'm still practicing it. I mean, his whole concept. I mean, it was brilliant. So methodology, and the way you think about things. Wow, that's amazing to study with people like that.
I have to tell this one story because I really love this if I can. I've been able to connect with Skip Hayden, post those days, and it's always amazing. And I saw Ian Froman once, and I got to tell the story really quickly because as I was about to leave Berklee, and in my mind, this took on a particular gravitas. Like my last final that I have to take is with Ian, and I don't know what we're going to do because all we ever did in Ian's classes is he'd play, I'd play, he'd play, I'd play, and we'd talk about it, and then he'd tell me records to check out. So it was very much, I didn't read a single note of music for the second semester in his private lessons. We just played, it was concepts. And I'm walking to his final, my last final. Once I'm done, I'm done with school. Like from the time that I was a little kid, preschool, all through, like I'm in the world now forever. And this is kind of weighing very heavily on me. And I'm very emotional about it because these two friends are getting an apartment. These two friends are getting an apartment and they're coming back next year and I'm not. And I was crestfallen. I was deeply, deeply saddened. And so I'm walking to Ian's lesson wondering, what are we going to do? And when I walk out of his door, I'm in the same place. I'm in the world for life now.
Right.
So I go to Ian's lesson. The student that's in there opens the door and says, "Bye, Ian. Have a nice summer. See you next year." He walks out, and I walk in. I'm like, "Hey, Ian." Ian grabs me by my jacket, throws my jacket off, and goes, Mr. Sucherman, you're late, but you made it just in time." And he shoves me behind the drum kit, and there's 3 music stands with a chart, open up this long. And he goes, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I did my best to play this chart. I got done with it, and he's standing looking over me. He goes, "Welcome to the world, kid."
Nice.
And I will always love him forever for that because when I hugged him goodbye and I walked out of his door, I felt like, okay, here we go. And it was 20 years later, I'm finding myself about to play at the Modern Drummer Festival in 2008. And I really don't get nervous, but I was nervous then because it's being filmed and, it's Gavin Harrison and Simon Phillips and all these other amazing drummers. And all of a sudden, there's Ian. He walks up to me and goes, "Hey, Todd, how you doing?" And I felt like, oh my God, an angel in my silent time of need. Just everything melted away. And I thought, how amazing is life? And I just went out there and played and had fun, which is what I was really supposed to do anyway. But yeah, so Berklee, there are some sparkly, magical things that still resonate through the decades for me from my 1 year there.
Sure. And people like Skip, I mean, amazing concepts, amazing teachers. I mean, those personalities. I mean, I studied with Kenwood Denard also. I mean, these are people who forever, it always comes back to you. And, as we influence others, who study with us, those are like lineages that come through you from different directions, and you carry it on and you pass it on. And thank God those people were there, because they really made the difference. Of course, you do the work. Of course, that you have to show up. You have to do the work. But those people really make the difference. They like turn on that switch, or they say something, or they do something in such a way that then you get it. You really get it.
And that's such a beautiful thing about what we do, is because those personal experiences that we have with our mentors and those we admire, they are things that you take with you, like things that you take from your parents or your grandparents or people that were, oops, I lost a camera. That'll happen sometimes. Hi, I'm glad we have this camera. So I'm going to be looking at you like this. Every now and then that one goes out, so forgive me.
Sure, no problem. Let's continue like this.
You can't, I mean, obviously you can have influences and musicians that you admire that you never meet, those that you only know from records or now videos, and that's important. But when you have someone that you've been in the room with that's affected you in that way, and is, giving you ideas that it lasts your whole life, and it's magic. It's magic.
Yeah. And it's, it's like there's method to the madness. Things happen for a reason, and making the decisions that one makes, whether they're artistic or life experiences. I mean, it's the same. Those things are like crossroads, and you make those decisions. And sometimes it's people who will say something or do something, and that's who you become. That's who you are, right?
Yeah, it's what you take with you. And another story I often tell is when I was 12 years old, I wrote Steve Smith a letter through Modern Drummer magazine, and lo and behold, he wrote me back a 6.5 handwritten a letter, answering all my questions, giving me great advice, a couple transcriptions from the Jean-Luc Ponty Enigmatic Ocean record, and a happier 12-year-old on the planet you couldn't find.
Yeah.
But every now and then I find myself giving another young drummer sort of the same advice that he gave me, and I think about how Steve's kindness to me ripples through the decades, through me and to others, and hopefully that will be passed on from them to the next generation after that. So it's we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and the lineage of our instrument and the lineage of our instrument, its place in music, it's just a wonderful thing to be a link in the chain,
Yeah, and it's along those lines, coming into contact with, Steve Smith. He's a brilliant guy and always very analytical. He's someone who's worked a lot in different concepts, different circumstances, and different paradigms of music. And you come across these people, but the thing that, like, you have to show up, you have to go to these places, meet such people, study, continue, and be curious. Always curious. I had the same experience with Ed Soph. I met him at a Jamie Aebersold camp, but then afterwards, we would write to each other. I would ask him questions and he would write back, answering because I had to learn a lot to learn, right? I said, man, it would take me 3 lifetimes to learn. But when people take the time and you share it, it really makes a difference.
But, at the same time, yes, but you have to be open to that.
Yeah.
And, we were obviously when we were younger, and we still are. But, in doing the master classes that I've been doing over the last number of years, I often read comments when I post about it where, they go, well, gee, maybe one day I'll be good enough to attend. Fear keeps drummers from saying yes to things. And by going to a drum camp or going to a master class. I mean, a clinic, you just go, you're a spectator. But, when you have this non-competitive situation where it's education and learning, still, it breaks my heart that people are so wrought with fear that they'd rather go, you know what? I'm just going to stay home and turn on the television and open a bag of Doritos and kind of
Yes.
safely do nothing, as opposed to saying yes, putting on clothes, driving somewhere, even if you have a little nervous trepidation, that's okay, because the only way that we learn is by putting ourselves in a position where maybe we don't feel qualified to be there. How else, you think just people become amazing jazz musicians like that? No, they have to A, B, C, D, E. You gotta go on that road. And so many people are just so wrought with fear that they would rather choose to be bereft of this magical,
Sure.
glorious experience of what we're talking about.
Sure.
Because it's easier to do nothing.
Yeah. It's like saying, when I have the time or when I have the money, I'm going to do that. That's never going to happen. You have to do it now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Get on the
If
track.
you say one day, that one day's never going to come.
Yeah.
You have to make it that day. I just did a video on this very topic, and I remember driving 3.5 hours from Chicago to Indianapolis to take a 1-hour lesson with Jim Chapin, and then getting in my car and driving 3.5 hours back home.
Right.
Because it was then or never, and I never saw Jim again. The opportunity never came about. So I'm so glad that I said yes, and spent 7 hours in the car to have a 1-hour lesson that is still, indelibly imprinted in my brain.
Oh, yeah.
And so grateful for having had that one-on-one experience where Jim's grabbing my hand and go no, like this. You can't learn that from YouTube. When someone grabs your hand and goes, no, chill, like this. That's everything. So I think a lot of the younger generation, they feel, I can get all the information that I want for free on YouTube. Well, you have to consider the source. B, it's a one-way street. It's not a two-way street.
That's right.
And C, more than half of it is being in the room and getting that instant feedback and critique and the
Right.
feeling that you take with you, because that was for you and with you, and you were working together with someone that you admire. And that's gold. It really is.
Absolutely. And that question always comes up. I saw this on YouTube. I mean, there is value to that. It's nice to see certain things, but you don't have that personalized feedback, and personalized meaning to you, because every single person is different, right? So when you're in the room with whoever you were in the room with, when they see how your hands move, because we're all built differently, we behave differently, we breathe differently, we think differently. So that person, and you've had this experience, I'm sure, you look at the person, it's not a formula, your answer. You look at it and say, you're analyzing, you say, okay, what is that person saying and what's that person doing? And then you see it, so you can give instant feedback to that very person.
Yes, and there's two things I always think about in this on this topic. Really, is number one, if you've never been to Paris, I can tell you what it's like. I can show you pictures. I can show you videos. You could watch like a Rick Steves half-hour show on things to see in Paris. But that's nothing like actually being in Paris and walking around going, oh my God, you're in the room. That's the difference. And also, Did you ever get to see Tony Williams play live?
Live? No. That's one of the
Okay.
few persons I have never seen live. I've watched a lot of videos, of course, but
Okay, so my heart aches for those that never got to see him play live, because I'm very fortunate I got to see, many of my heroes live. There was something that happened, especially in the Jazz Showcase in that room. Him with this big, Gretsch kit with the 24-inch bass drum, the yellow Gretsch kit.
oh yes.
Seeing him in that room, when he would start to play, it was the closest thing that I've ever felt to like voodoo or some sort of something. It was like a fight or flight feeling, this primal thing, and the hair on your arms would stand up. And again, like, I got to see a majority of my heroes, but no one ever made me feel the way Tony did when he played, when you were in the room. Now, I've listened to countless hours on records. I've watched countless hours of videos. There's nothing like being in the room when he played. There's nothing that captured the startling fight or flight voodoo that it was almost scary.
Yeah.
And then once you calmed down and you realized what you were hearing and witnessing, it was just otherworldly. And all I can say is to those that have seen Tony play, and especially those that have seen Tony play on that big kit when he played with his quintet, like 86 through 94.
Right.
Those the Blue Note years when he was the band leader and composer. That was a really special band with Wallace Roney and Billy Pierce and Mulgrew Miller and Rob Hurst and a couple other bass players. But that band was really something else, and they were a band. It wasn't just Tony with and here's 4 other guys this year, and here's 4 or 5 other guys. He had a band, and he had his thing. So those that got to see him in those era know exactly what I'm talking about. It was pure voodoo.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same kind of thing. I remember seeing Elvin live after I'd heard, and it was just not the same. It was all of a sudden you understand he was loud. He took up the whole space, and his whole approach was nothing what I thought it would be. He was like amazing. But getting to Tony, I have a Tony story. It's as close as I got. I mean, listening to records and videos, of course. But when I was studying timpani with my a timpani teacher before coming to Montreal at Ottawa U, he was the timpanist with the National Arts Centre Orchestra. I was a rock drummer, trying to get everything else classical. I really wanted to get a degree in this, so I did. And then one day he comes in and he gives me this album. He said to me, "Have you ever heard of Tony Williams?" And I said, "No, never heard of him." He says, "Well, you should check out this album." It was the Black Album, the trio, with organ, bass. Was that Jack Bruce on bass?
Yeah, Jack Bruce and was it Larry Young?
Larry Young, that's right.
Yeah.
It was that Black Album. And I'll remember, I'll always remember, because I used to play along with the records, the typical rock stuff and everything in between. I'm learning classical. Now, here's my timpani teacher giving me Tony Williams' album, says, please listen to this. And I listened to it, and I'm like blown away. Next lesson, Ian says to me, "So what'd you think?" I said, "That was fantastic. I love the overdubs on the cymbals that they did." He looks at me. He said, "No, that's all one take, and that's Tony." And I went, "You can't be serious." Yeah. So that right away set it up. I said, "Oh no!" Then I'm on a mission. I have to see these people.
Yeah, it's funny when I would hear the Miles stuff when I was a kid, and I'm talking about a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. It was too evolved for me, and then I got into to Smith, Terry, Vinny, and I'm talking like I'm like 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And then a friend of mine gave me the Tony Williams record, Believe It.
Okay.
And then when I heard that, I thought, oh, this guy's the source. This guy's the hero of my heroes. So I could hear where a younger Steve and a younger Vinny, a younger Terry were getting some of these ideas from that.
Yeah.
Tony was the guy that they sat around listening to and falling off their chairs in laughter at how hip and unbelievable the stuff was. So that's a great gateway record for those that aren't really familiar with Tony Williams. I'd say start with the Tony Williams New Lifetime, Believe It from 1975, and then work your way in and out on both sides, because he changed the face of drumming and the face of music a couple of times in his short life.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was 50 when he left us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And then I hadn't heard Tony for a while. The Miles stuff, which was like insanity. You listen to that, you say, it's not possible at 17 or whatever age he was, and just so musical and incredible. But then later, when he went into that phase, he was like a rock drummer from the jazz tradition, and like setting a new pace. Then you have Billy Cobham on the other side, right? And you see Tony doing what he's doing in his own world, and making waves, making blazing trails. And
yeah, I mean, if you think about the evolution of music that happened from, say, 1963 to 1975, you want to look at those 12 years, I mean, that encapsulates the Beatles,
yeah,
the Beach Boys, Zeppelin, The Who, Miles going from, the swing into, what he morphed into, the birth of fusion, Mahavishnu, through Dark Side of the Moon. It's that explosion was so incredible, that Big Bang. We'll never see the warp speed of incredible quality music like that was experienced in those 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
It's remarkable when you think about it.
No, you said it well, the Big Bang, because it was. I mean, I grew up with all of that, and every week somebody would say, check this out. So we would all listen to the record or go to the record store, and some of us would say, I got to listen to that. I have to listen to that. We'd all leave with for like 5, 6 records, and every week there's somebody, if it's not Jimi Hendrix, then it's Santana, or Supertramp, or Gentle Giant. It would, or Frank Zappa's newest, Mothers of Invention, and you say, what?
Yeah.
It was like
when you think of the Beatles alone.
The Beatles, yeah.
In 3 years, they went from Love Me Do to Turn Off Your Mind, Relax, and Float Downstream. That's
amazing.
Amazing in 36 months.
Yeah.
It's bonkers when you think about it like that.
Oh yeah, that's. When you think about it, those of us who lived that time, and every day, every record was a new chapter in life. I mean, that was the soundtrack to a life. I mean, we all say that, but it really was, because it just opened up your mind. Every time you listen to music, it's not the same song in a different key or with a different structure, different words. This was like total eclipse of everything. And then if Sgt. Pepper would come along, or Penny Lane. I know all of those backwards just because it was just mind-boggling. And as you say, like, it's such a short time. Insane. Incredible.
Yeah. I kind of miss the days of waiting for a new record to come out without having seen or heard half of it on video in advance. When you'd buy a record on pure mystery and imagination and hope that it's great, and you take it home and you unwrap it and you drop the needle, that's very exciting for a listener. And by the way, not to take the conversation in a strange turn, but I always think about this with vinyl and an actual physical, tactile product that you can hold. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why any band or artist that was fortunate enough to have records in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and right up to maybe the early 90s, compact disc kind of took over,
Right.
is that right now, any band or artist that is still alive and can still perform will and can always work because that audience went along with them for the ride. They sat there and that was their Tuesday night. They bought the record, they looked at the logo, they looked at the artwork, they had their headphones on, they read the lyrics, it's recorded in Sweden. So now that takes on a new mystical notion in your brain, and now if you just call songs out of the air from whatever device that you call it, and once you're done with the song, God, I'm bored with that. You move on. It's hard for a lot of the newer acts to build a career, build a following that goes with them for life. And I think having had the experience to grow up when we did is that you sat there with a record, dreaming about it, and putting the needle on again. I want to hear that again, without the distractions of videos or videos with another sidebar of other videos that you might want to look at that takes your distraction away
Right.
from listening and being in the music. That's something, and being in the band Styx is something that I don't take for granted, is that I got to ride the coattails of a band that sold 40, 50 million records before I darkened their door. So I'm able to be a part of that lineage where we don't have to convince people to come see the show. There's an audience that will be there for as long as the band's alive and as long as the audience is still alive too. It's an interesting thing.
But it's an incredible experience. I mean, I had like 5,000 LPs for a while, and every time I moved, they went with me. So that collection, I gave it to somebody, and I only kept maybe a couple of hundred, just because it was just way too much. But I listened to it. I set it up, and I sometimes I sit and listen, and I mean, we all hear the difference, of course, but it also brings back that imagination of when we were kids and listening to albums.
Yes.
Like you say, the artwork, you know the story, there's something concrete about it. It's like owning a nice drum set.
It's like if you played baseball as a kid, it's like your ball glove. It's like your baseball mitt that you use. So right before the pandemic, it was February 2020. I bought sort of my first nice turntable. I hadn't had a turntable since the late 80s or something like that. But I kept all my records. I never got rid of them. I don't know why I did. I'm glad I did. But I kept them, and I moved them from place to place all through my life. And they were heavy, and they were a pain in the butt, but I did it. I couldn't get rid of them. It's like throwing photo albums away. Even though they're digitized, I couldn't throw the originals away. So I got a nice turntable. The pandemic occurs, and we started, playing records. And I can't say, in my opinion, that it sounds better. It just sounds different. It's more syrupy. The vinyl infiltrates a room differently when you're putting on records than putting on digital music that just sort of flies above your head, and it's up to you to pay attention to it or not. Vinyl is like, if you ever remember, when people smoked and you were in a house and there was that haze of smoke that just sat right there. That's what vinyl does sonically. But I sat there with my daughter, and I'm listening to my copy of The Who's Quadrophenia, which is one of my all-time favorite records.
Right.
And I almost got, teary-eyed, thinking, this is the Quadrophenia that I listened to in the bedroom of the house that I grew up in, that soothed me, that meant something to me, that helped me understand that, that adolescent, male angst thing you go through. No record spoke to that in the history of music the way Quadrophenia did, in my opinion. And I'm sitting there, my then 5-year-old daughter on the couch thinking, this is amazing. It's not, hey, hey, Sonic thing in my house, play Quadrophenia. That was my Quadrophenia, like that was my baseball mitt or my first drum set.
Yes.
Like you said, that's a very heavy thing that didn't dawn on me that vinyl people understand and they get, but that was sort of a, an epiphany for me in that moment.
Absolutely. And I still get it. I mean, I sit down and you put the needle gently and you listen and then you say, wow, I never heard that one before, that part before. I mean, we always go through that. And records that we would lend each other back then. You said, Aldo, or I'd say to my friend, you got to hear this album. I mean, I remember every time a record that would be like groundbreaking, it was the thing. Everybody called each other and said, come to my house, you got to hear this album.
Yes,
I remember.
That's part of the growing as a musician and the friendships that we have. And, even through my early 20s, I'd get together with friends and we called them, back when Michael Jordan was on the Bulls, sort of that era, we'd watch the game, have a few beers, and then we called it Pick-a-Tune. And everyone would go around in a circle and you pick a tune, you play it and you talk about it. And then now it's your turn. They'd play a song at night, you talk about it. That was a very cool way to share music like that.
Yeah, no, those are great. We had a Saturday morning thing at the record shop. The store here in Montreal was called Phantasmagoria back then. And a bunch of us would show up, and the owner was really cool, really great guy, because he would say, this new album came in, you want to hear it? Everybody was, of course. So we'd play it, and then somebody said, that's great, I'll buy one. So it was like everybody, the place would sell out that record. And somebody would say, didn't Jimi Hendrix just come out with a new one? He says, yes, you have to hear this. So it would be like that, like turning people on to new music all the time. And then I remember, this takes me back to another memory I had when I was in love with this girl. When I had a party I was invited to with some friends. And I said, oh, great, her parents were away and we're having a party at her house. So we're all there. And somebody put on the first record by Led Zeppelin. Of course, the record comes on, and the whole night, all of us were like around the turntable, and I never even spoke to the girl.
But when you hear that, though, you're transported back to that very night.
Yeah, every time.
That's the power of music. Music can take you back to a time faster and more powerful than a photograph can. You know, so we hear ga ga, like you're right back there at that party.
Right, and space and time. It's amazing, and and then the subject. What they were doing, and all those musicians were very young too, which is amazing when you think about it. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But I have another question, because we can talk about this forever. But you played with other people, other artists like Brian Wilson. Are those just regular sessions, or you worked with people like that? How did that come about?
Well, Brian came about. I was able to play on 5 of his records, and I did his first ever solo tour, which was really only 2 weeks long. The first one because he wanted to see that if he could do it. And at that point, Styx picked up again. Styx was on a little bit of a break, and so I had to go back to my my main job. But the Brian thing came about where I had done a lot of work with a producer named Joe Thomas in Chicago in the past, and he had ended up working on some sort of Beach Boys tribute record, and he got along with Brian, and Brian trusted him, and their wives became friends. And so Joe ended up producing this record called, Imagination? Forgetting the name. I want to say it's Imagination. Anyways, it's Brian's record from 1998. And Joe called me to play a couple songs on that, and Eddie Bayers did the rest of the record. And then at that point, Joe said, well, do you want to play at Farm Aid? Which is the Neil Young, Willie Nelson run benefit for farmers in the United States.
Right.
And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And then that turned into, well, would you want to do Brian's, sort of first solo tour? It's only going to be like 10 days in 2 weeks. And I said, hey, absolutely. I'd love to do it. So that started that relationship. And then I recommended Taylor Mills for a female singer for that gig. And then we fell in love, and she's been my life partner and wife for almost 25 years now. So I was sort of honorarily in that camp as well, even though Taylor was there for close to 13 years in that band. But it was a great experience to work with, someone who changed the face of 20th century music. I mean, is there a better song in the world than God Only Knows? I mean, that might be just the greatest song ever written. And Paul McCartney would agree. So, to have been in his orbit, to have worked with him, and to have fallen in love with a woman who had become my wife with his music as the soundtrack to that special time.
Yeah.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
Well,
I could go on and on, but it really was amazing to work with him. And, a peculiar character, and maybe he damaged as he was such a sweet human being. Like there wasn't, he could not tell a lie. There was not a bad bone in his body. He was funny and unintentionally funny at times. And you just knew that it was always going to be creative and interesting when you were in his presence and in his orbit. And I've seen him do astronomically unbelievable things where he'd be writing a piece of music and he'd just build a harmony. Hey, you sing this, and he'd play 4 bars, and then the next guy, you do this, you do, and all of a sudden you go from what the heck is this to now the sun is poking out of the clouds and it's some divine thing. And he was just sitting there by the piano, and this popped in his head.
Wow.
So to witness that sort of genius, on a random Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. But it shows you that, but sometimes, Todd, and I tell people, there's no such thing as a coincidence. You show up and things develop. You showed up to, one thing led to another. You made certain decisions. And then you get into that band and you meet the person, your life partner. I mean, people should be so lucky, and that those things only come if you do the work and you show up and you stay consistent, right?
Well, showing up means that you would have said yes to something. So, let's say you say yes to a gig that doesn't sound particularly interesting. It might even be unsavory, or it might be a pain in the butt. But you said yes. Well, you don't know. You might show up, and the bass player, maybe that's the guy that's going to change your life, or maybe that's going to be one of your new best friends. And it was just some hotel jazz gig with brushes or something like that. Something that you thought lame, but I'm not working, so I may as well take it. You are the end result of every gig that you took, every drive, every staircase you schlepped drums through, every hotel kitchen, every back door that you had to go through, every, it's 1,000,000 degrees below zero and it's snowing out, and you're out driving home at 2:30 in the morning from a gig. It's the result of all those things that you do that can take you somewhere unexpected. Now, there's some people that aren't cut out for that sort of life. They want to know how much money they're going to make. They want to go to the same place and sit at the same desk. And I'm not degrading that. Like, that's some people that they want that and they feel comfortable. Me, I like not knowing what's going to happen or what the income this year is going to be. I've always enjoyed that question mark, but by saying yes and by showing up to whatever it is, whether it's a learning experience or a gig that you think is going to be not a big deal, all those things, again, you're throwing those experiences in your vocabulary bag, in your memory, in the way that you conduct yourself on stage and off stage. And I always say it in the master classes, and it's true, and it'll never stop being true. There's 5 things that you can do to put your career in a positive trajectory. Number 1, always be on time. And what does that mean for a drummer? That means being devastatingly early. Yeah. You have all the knowledge in the world. Yeah. Right here. You want to learn how to speak French or Italian? Like you can. So get there early. You should never be late. Always get there early. Because let's say you're late. Maybe the guy that you're going to meet that was going to change your life is not going to recommend you now because you're an idiot that showed up 5 minutes after you're supposed to start playing with your kit. Now they got to wait for you to set up, right? Number 2, be prepared. If someone calls you for a gig, learn these 25 songs. What do? You learn them. You learn them. Number 3, your gear is in tip-top shape. Great drums, great cymbals, the right choices for the music that you're going to play. Number 4, you nail the job. And that's a gift that you already gave to yourself because, number 2, you were prepared. And now you're having fun. Number 4, nail the job. Let's play. Let's have fun. Number 5, leave everybody happy that you were there. Be a breath of fresh air, be a cool hang. Leave everyone happy that you were there. And most people can't put those 5 things together, much less musicians. So if you put those 5 things together, give yourself a couple years and see where it'll take you. Whether or not you want to do this for your livelihood or not, it doesn't matter. Even if you just want to get more gigs and play with more people in the town that you live. But put those 5 notions together and off you go.
Absolutely. And then, I mean, just to add to that, which is really part of that also is, I mean, when you're bringing something to the table, it cannot be stress. You don't want to bring that to the table. You bring something that's a positive. Always. And why not? We have the choice. It's really a choice.
Yeah. Right? So choose that and see what happens.
Yeah. Who are some of the other great people? I mean, Brian Wilson is a great example because he with Beach Boys and the Beatles, of course, there was that great competition between those two camps. So we'd always watch who's next record, who's watching, who's trying to outdo the other. It was such creative madness at the time. But who else did you work with that was that this journey led you to that has left a big stamp on it?
Boy, there's no one that, I mean, everyone I worked with to get here was instrumental. There were 2 musicians in Chicago, bass player Bob Lizick, who I ended up doing the Brian Wilson gig with, and same thing, Scott Bennett. Those 2 guys stuck their necks out for me when I came back from Berklee, and I went back home to Chicago and just took every gig, every wedding, everything I could. And in time, I was playing with musicians that were in the recording scene. And at that time in Chicago, Chicago is sort of the mecca for jingles, music for television and radio commercials. And in those days, there were easily 25 music houses that, hired musicians for sessions. So I sent tapes to all of them, and I tried to make phone calls and take people to lunch. And it just seemed that there was sort of a brick wall with that. And it wasn't until those producers couldn't get their normal guys, then they'd ask someone like Scott Bennett or Bob Lizick, who should we get? And they started recommending me. So they were the ones that pulled me into the recording scene. So in time, I did my first jingles around, 91, 92. And by 94, 95, I was doing 20 to 30 sessions a month. I thought, why would I ever want to move to New York or Los Angeles? This is great. And it gave my evenings free to gig with whomever I wanted. So I was in a 13-piece Latin salsa samba band. I played bebop clubs with Orbit Davis. I was in rock bands trying to get the record deal, and then I was playing corporate parties and high weddings with a wedding band that brought their own gear. I just showed up with snare cymbals and pedals, walked through the front door like a person. So those were very exciting days where I was working a lot. I was making a living, like a really nice living for the first time in my life. And so when that's really what led to the Styx gigs, because I said yes to all these things. And then I finally was in the recording world there. There's a guy, Keith Marks, who was he ran the cartridge companies for the drummers and all the musicians really that were in the recording scene. And he'd worked with the guys in Styx in the past and some of the guys on their solo projects. So when John Panazzo was in ill health, they called him and said, who should we call for a recording session? And Keith said, oh, you should call Todd. So that was my in with that camp. But, to your question now, I feel I'm getting off track.
No, it's perfect. It's exactly.
Some records I've done recently have been really important to me. The 2 records with this band called Altiforma, and Antoine Fafard, whose band that really is, and doing a record with him was incredible. I've done 3 records with this guy, Finally George, out of Hamburg, Germany. Another guy from Hamburg, Frank Us from Legacy Pilots. I'm so grateful that these guys are sending me music to participate and record that are just, crown jewels in my discography, just music that I adore. So things always continue on. You know what I mean?
Of course, yeah.
From then until now.
And that's part. I mean, that's the whole journey thing. I mean, everybody you meet has you become part of their orbit, and or they're yours, and you never know. There's no such thing as coincidence. Like always being ready and always showing up. I mean, that pretty much says it, and that's your whole trajectory has been like that. And any one of us, if we think back, it's exactly that.
And Aldo, I often talk about this too, because this is I'm not entirely sure the lattice work of the universe and how things work, but how things have worked for me in my life is all the times, and this is really more when I was younger, but every now and then I feel these little pangs of, hey, you should be doing something. Hey, you should be doing something. And when you're young and you're trying to hustle and you're trying to make things happen, and okay, you have to do that. But a lot of those times I felt, well, I got to get out of the house and I got to go out and I got to shake hands and kiss babies. And this is a guitarist I want to talk to. I want to be, and it was always that motivation of climbing the ladder as opposed to just letting things happen. Anytime I went to do that, I felt that this was not truly who I am as a person. And B, it was always a swing and a miss. It always seemed to be like I'm trying to grab onto smoke, and things and situations would just turn into apparitions and disappear. And it was truly the times that I felt, I don't care. I don't care what happens. And I let go of any of this sort of desperate, I got to make things happen. I got to hustle. When I let that go and I truly didn't care and I was just content and concentrating on just good work, handing in good work, that's when the cool stuff would float to me. Because it's if you're scared, if you're this little woodland creature that feels like every day is do or die, the cool things might be freaked of you too. So if you just relax, don't care, concentrate on handing in good work and concentrate on your craft and your part in it, then the universe relax and things float to you, or you'll get a call from someone, you'll get an opportunity that you couldn't have ever even fathomed or authored or dreamt of. That is the way the universe has worked for me. I've had this conversation with other musicians who have, sort of echoed that sentiment. So for a lot of the young musicians out there, I think if you just relaxed and let things happen, rather than trying to desperately make things happen and having the phony Hollywood smile and rubbing people's shoulders and hey man, yo, you sound awesome. If you just sort of relax and be in it as opposed to trying to make stuff happen.
Yeah.
As long as you can do it here, as long as this is real, there's going to be an opportunity for you.
Yeah. That and just a good personality, appreciating that you're able to do this, just do it. Yeah, that works. Very, that's called wisdom. Thank you, Todd. Yeah. and I mean, we could talk about all this forever, and I think any one of us thinking about this, and it's the journey doesn't end here. This is just part of the journey. Here we are talking about the journey so far, and there's more, but the principles are always the same, being true to yourself and just being you and being that person, because we're all individuals, totally different, and crossing paths with those other people who make our lives better, and we have to do the same. I mean, that's a responsibility as far as I'm concerned. And I think, I mean, you said that in many different ways. But I want to thank you for being on the podcast. This is great. We must do another, but but keep on those master classes there. I mean, I think those are important, people to study, to remain curious, being interested, becoming interesting by building yourself better as a person and as a player, and just continue giving.
I will give as long as there's people willing to listen and learn right along with me. It's a privilege that I take very seriously, even though we have a good time and there's a lot of laughs. It ultimately is a serious thing, because I get a letter from someone whose life I improved in some way, whether it's just something mental that they were able to overcome, or they're playing better that way, or they've changed their grip and their carpal tunnel has subsided. Like being able to pass on information and help other people is a true privilege. So I'll keep doing it. Thanks for that, Aldo.
Yeah, and making a difference. Yes. Well, as I always say, thank you, Todd. And as I always say, to be continued.